Thanks for joining me today on the Speak Their Name Suicide Memorial Quilt Workshop. Just to give you some background on the project, my name is Rebecca Jackson and I was commissioned in January of this year by Greater Manchester Health and Social Care Partnership to produce a memorial quilt for those people across Greater Manchester who have lost somebody to suicide. The idea behind it was I was bereaved by suicide myself 5 years ago, and during that time I taught myself to sew and taught myself to knit, and that process of getting involved with crafts was something that I found really helped me overcome a lot of my anxiety and some of the very difficult days very early on in my bereavement, and it was something that I wanted to share with other bereaved families. The idea was everybody would meet together in groups and we'd learn some stitching techniques, and we'd each produce a square in memory of somebody we have loved and lost to suicide. And at the end of the project, all the squares would be joined together to make a beautiful quilt that would raise awareness for the growing number of people that we lose every year to suicide in Greater Manchester and obviously across the world. Then the coronavirus struck, so we had to move everything online. So I hope you will bear with me. My other half is not a cameraman and I am no Valerie Singleton, but we are doing our very best to bring these workshops to you today. So this week I've been chatting in the online group to people about what they wanted to produce in their squares. And one of the themes that kept coming up were sunflowers, because they're a very cheerful and vibrant and big and statement-like flower. And it's something that a lot of people associate with their loved ones. So I've produced a little embroidered sunflower for you this week. And this week I want to take you through some of the basics of hand embroidery. And this is quite a simple little project, and hopefully it will give you some ideas for what to put in your square. And with a bit of practice over the week, you can come up with something like this. It isn't hugely difficult. Of course, if this still looks problematic for you, don't worry, I've come up with a cheats alternative. There is always a cunning plan. So if this looks too much for you, there are ways around it. So before we start, you're going to need a few things for this week. You're going to need your embroidery hoop, and you're going to need some of this. And this is just embroidery thread, and you're going to cut yourself a piece about that long. And what you will see is at the end of the thread it divides into numerous strands, and for most projects like this you're going to need about 3 strands. So separate your thread like that into 3 strands. Put your practice fabric on a hoop, keep it nice and tight, and I've drawn some lines on there with the Frixion erasable markers. These are great because you can just draw on there, and if you iron it afterwards the marks will completely disappear. But this is only a practice piece, so you can just use a pencil, it's not a problem. So what I need you to do is tie a little knot at the end of your fabric. And the stitches I'm going to show you today, we're going to go through the back stitch, the whip stitch and the chain stitch, and they're all really easy basic embroidery stitches which you can use in lettering or stems of flowers or to mark any lines at all. And then I'm going to take you through some filling stitches. So we're going to look at the satin stitch, the lazy daisy and French knots, and I'm going to give you some ideas of what to do with these. But if you can do these stitches, you can pretty much embroider whatever you like for your project. So let's start first of all with the back stitch. So with your thread, you are going to come up on your line, and then you're going to take the needle behind the thread and up just a little bit in front, like so. Then flush against your first stitch, so again go backwards and then up in front, flush against the last stitch you made, and up in front. One of my hairs has caught on there. Behind, and in front. The reason I'm not going like this is, although it's easier, it puts too much pressure on your cotton fabric and you'll lose some of the tension and you won't get such a precise, neat line. So although it's a bit more time consuming, this is the way to do it. And the best thing to do to get neat and to get your practice up is just draw some lines. If you don't want to waste your embroidery cotton, you can practice this in just normal sewing cotton. But if you can see that at home, just up in front, go back to make your stitch, hence the name back stitch, and then come up in front, go back to make your stitch, and come up the front and go back. And when you've finished, you can just weave the ends in. Okay. Okay, the next stitch we're going to do is whip stitch, and whereas with back stitch we worked right to left, now we're going to be working left to right. Now whip stitch is really good for doing stems of flowers because it's a little bit thicker, so it has a bit more of a structure to it, and it's also really nice to go around curves. So you pull your cotton through, you bring it down as if you're going to make a stitch, but hold that loop there and bring your needle up between the two threads and pull it through. Bring your needle down as if you're going to make a stitch, hold the loop and bring it up where your last stitch ended. So make a stitch, and come up in the middle, make a stitch, come up in the middle, make a stitch, come up in the middle. I'm trying to think of an easy way to remember to do this. So if you make a smiley face, and come up in the nose, make a smiley face, and come up through the nose. And can you see how that produces a slightly thicker, almost like a rope effect? I'll just do a few more for you. Make a stitch, come up in the middle, make a stitch, come up in the middle. And that, and to finish off, make your stitch, and that is your whip stitch. Okay, pull it through at the back, trim your end, and now I'm going to show you how to do a chain stitch. This is something I remember doing at primary school. And you had to make a bag and sew your initials on it. And you did it in chain stitch. It's quite a thick stitch, and again it's quite good for lettering. So you pull your thread through. And so if you remember, we worked right to left on the back stitch, left to right on the whip stitch, and now I'm going to go down and up. So again, you're making a loop and you're going just a little bit behind your first stitch. Pull it through to make a loop, but before your loop is finished, come up along the line through the loop and pull it through. Go back through the loop, make another loop, but before you finish, bring your needle through the loop. So can you see you're making a row of little chains? So back into your last loop, make another, and bring your needle up through it. Go back into the last one, and come up through the next. And you can make your loops as big as you want, but the smaller you make them, the neater it's going to be. So come up through the loop. Oh. Staying to the line, come up through the loop, make another loop, go back in the hole before and come up to form the next one. Go back in the one before and come up to form the next one. And when you've finished, just to finish it off, put your needle really close to the last loop and pull it through to anchor your chain. So you have the back stitch, the whip stitch and the chain stitch. The next progression from this is the lazy daisy stitch, which you can see here. And all the lazy daisy stitches are large chain stitches. So you pull your cotton through, just bring your needle in just slightly behind the thread, but this time make a large loop, pull it through like that and anchor it just like that. You can make them as big and as small as you like. So go back to the center, a little bit behind, pull it through to form your petal and anchor it. Go back to the center, go a little bit behind, make your loop, make your petal, make sure the point of your needle is within the loop, pull it through and anchor it. And those are your lazy daisy stitches. So you can use that to make raindrops or flower petals or tears. It's a nice big easy stitch. So the next stitch I'm going to teach you is satin stitch. In fact, what we'll do here, so I don't have to start again, so draw yourself a leaf shape, and all satin stitches is straight stitches. Now the easiest way to ensure that your stitches all go in the same direction is start halfway through the shape you're going to fill in and decide which direction you want your stitches. So if it's a leaf, I'm going to want my stitches all going that way. So draw your stitch in the angle you want to follow, so come along the lines like that. And then you're going to bring your needle up very close to your first stitch. And they're just very straight stitches. Following the shape, keeping your stitches very close together. And that is really all satin stitches. It looks quite straightforward, but you have to be really patient, stay to the lines and keep your stitches very close together. Follow the line. And if you can see, I'm absolutely as close as I can to the previous stitch. So that is your satin stitch. And finally, I'm going to show you the French knot. Now these are a bit tricky to get your head round. But once you've finished these, once you've done a few, there are lots of fun things you can do with French knots, but it just takes a bit of patience to get your head around them. Okay. So with a French knot, pull your thread through, and then with your other hand pull your thread taut and hold your needle horizontally in front of that cotton and wrap it backwards to forwards twice round the needle. So once, twice, and then holding that taut, put your needle point in just next to where your thread came from. Hold your cotton taut, pull the needle through till it's about 1 centimetre away, and then gently pull it through to form your knot. Pull your needle through, hold your thread taut, your needle in front of the thread, and wrap it once, twice, put your needle back in just next to where it came out, keep that cotton taut till just before the end and pull it through to make your knot. I'll do it once more. Hold your thread taut, your needle in front, and wrap it from the back over and over, and pull it through. So those are your basic embroidery stitches, and there's lots you can do. If you look at this piece here, all this is a row of whip stitches made into the branches of a tree, and I've just covered it with lots and lots of tiny little French knots in different colours, and it's quite effective. And this is just, the lettering is just done in backstitch. I haven't used fancy material. These are some scraps of material that I've just layered and I've held down with some light running stitches, but that's quite an easy thing to do and a great way of making French knots. So with the sunflower project, what we've done here is I've taken a piece of plain cotton and I've drawn on a sunflower. So we've got the petals, the main centre, the stem and the leaves. And to fill this in, what we've done here, just put your hoop on, and on the finished article we've filled in the petals with satin stitch. The stem is a whip stitch. We've done satin stitches here on the green, and what I've done on the green to give it a bit of direction and some interest, I've split the leaf in two. So we've done the stitches going that way here and that way there, and then we've filled the centre in with French knots. Now, if that all looks a bit too much for you, I've come up with a cheats method of doing the sunflower. So what I've drawn on a piece of paper, a piece of fabric, I've drawn the sunflower on, but I've just used some art pencils, and you can use felt tip pens, you can use acrylic paints, you can use whatever you like, and I've just coloured the petals in. So you can just colour that in. However you like that. Now these are watercolour pencils, so I did have a go at doing it in watercolours, but what you will find is it will bleed through the fabric, but it gives it quite a nice effect. And what I've used here is I've used just normal threading cotton, just normal stitching cotton, and I've doubled it, and I've made it look quite scruffy so it looks like shading. But I've done the outline in just normal black cotton, and I've done some shading around the side of the flower pot, and I've filled it in like that. So you don't, that's done quite scruffily to give the impression of free motion embroidery, which you do on a sewing machine, which I will take you through later in the courses. But again, if you're not confident with embroidery, you can have a go at doing that with pencil colours. And just to give you some more inspiration, we've done the lettering here, just in running stitch with some satin stitch. Again, you can just practice it, practice your lettering. I've done this in pencil, so it won't actually wash out, so that's a bit of a shame. But if you use one of the Frixion markers, they will iron off. But just for practicing, it's quite easy to do. If you get a bit more confident, another thing that you can try, if I find my pen amongst all of this rubbish, it's vanished. Oh, here we are. Is if you draw a simple shape, you can draw a letter in the middle, and then you can fill this in with flower motifs going around the shape. Which you can then fill in with embroidery. Which I've done here. And these are quite simple. You've got your French knots along a whip stitch. You've got a little violet flower done in satin stitch. We've got some whip stitch and we've got some lazy daisies there to make the petals. So again, lots of embroidery ideas for you. So that, Mr. Jackson returns with the camera. So that's about it for today. The video will be posted in the Facebook, and if you are bereaved in Greater Manchester and you want to take part in the project, please head along to our closed Facebook group, which is called Speak Their Name, the Greater Manchester Suicide Memorial Quilt, and you can join in with us on Facebook, or come and say hi to me on Twitter, and my name on Twitter is rjax4. And I'd love to see what you're making and any ideas that you have. But thank you very much for joining me today. Stay safe, stay at home. Thanks for now. Bye bye.